Hi, I'm Jennifer Lord, Jen, and I teach at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. I teach both preaching and worship, and I serve there in the Dorothy B. Vickery Chair of Homiletics and Liturgical Studies. That's my long, fancy title. I'm also an ordained minister of Word and Sacrament in the Presbyterian Church USA. And I have written the piece on worship, which I love. So I was very excited to receive that assignment and be able to contribute to this wonderful series by focusing on worship. I love that. That's what I teach. And even though, as I mentioned, I also teach preaching, I really do it from the vantage point of the sermon in the context of worship. And I think about our Sunday gathering as the people of God, corporate worship, as the high point of the week that in turn resources everything else that we do in our personal lives and for the good of society, how that flows out the rest of the week. So I look forward to how this portion is discussed and how it serves the church. Thank you. As we think about Sunday morning worship for Christians, Sunday morning worship in our denomination, another aspect that I want to lift up for discussion is participation. Again, there's so many ways that we can talk about worshiping God, but I wanted to focus on Sunday morning and kind of different dynamics or aspects of that. So to think about participation, all right. Well, we could say we participate by showing up, some who are live streaming or joining one way or the other virtually. That's an aspect of participation. And surely those who are able to gather in person, make their way, whether it's to someone's home as a home church or big, older, beautiful building or something in between. There are all these ways that the gathering happens, and we are going to gather because we intend to participate. So that's something to think about. How do we participate? What are we participating in? And what's the purpose of our participation? What comes from our participation? So I just mentioned a whole bunch of questions there, and those in and of themselves would be wonderful for discussion. One thing I always hope that we can think about is the actual physical setup of our worshiping spaces, because many of us are in spaces that are designed with what we call the chancel area. So that's where the pulpit is and the communion table, maybe the baptismal font, that can be in different places. Maybe the choir sits in the chancel, not always, but it's that up front area. That's the fancy word for it, chancel. So many of us are in spaces that are built with chancel, and then the rest of the building, the rest of the sanctuary, are rows of pews or rows of chairs. And no matter what, that starts to put us into an audience situation. And I think that, especially for Presbyterians with our history and inheritance, sometimes we might devolve, I'm using that word intentionally, a little too much into thinking that we are an audience. And so sometimes that means we expect the people up front, be it the minister or music director or choir, whatever titles we have for the leaders. We think that they are doing the work and we in the pews are meant to receive. Maybe we are receiving an education. Maybe we are being entertained. Maybe we are receiving some balm for our soul, some type of therapy. Those things happen. And any of those things can be taken a little bit too far. So I like to introduce and reintroduce Kierkegaard's theater of worship. That's Soren Kierkegaard. And long ago in Presbyterian Church youth curriculum, we had that in our confirmation materials. So I used that as a pastor. And Kierkegaard's theater of worship wants us to understand that we in the pews are actually on stage as well. And we're on stage. So you kind of have to remix this in your mind, your visual. We're on stage. And actually the pastors and the song leaders, they are in the wings prompting us. And it's not that God is in the audience and we're trying to please God. It's not that God is floating around somewhere nebulous, but God, the Holy Trinity, is present with us. So the sense is that in worship, we join together to participate, and we're all doing these very important actions together. We're gathering for praise. We are making our confession of sin. We are receiving a word of forgiveness. We are going to open our hearts to hear the word of God and take in those words of life, sweeter than honey, for us now, for today. We are going to make our prayers for our needs and the needs of the world. We are going to be fed with bread and cup at the table. We are going to be sent into the world. We will make our offering. We will be blessed and sent forth. We are doing these things together. So I love for us to think about participation and to think that even if we're using a bulletin, that those words on the printed page are meant to come back to life. They are meant to live as our responsive litanies. They are meant to live as prayers that we make. The songs are supposed to rise up off the page and pulse through our bodies. We are giving ourselves over to this moment of being in the presence of God as the gathered body, and we participate. And something very important in our Reformed tradition is that we believe that these actions that we do are actually ways that God blesses and graces us. Our fancy language for that is means of grace. So to come to each of those moments of worship and to enter in fully, to even prepare for them, prepare to confess our sin and prepare to pray for the needs of the world, we can participate and expect that we are blessed by God and that we are going to grow in God by our participation. So I hope you have good discussions about how you participate in worship, how you prepare to do so, and what can happen in your places of worship to expand ways of participating.